if you haven't forgiven in your heart, how are you supposed to look clearly at your side of the street? Where was I selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid, right? And the lens you're looking through is tarnished with what the hurt you're still feeling because you haven't forgiven the other person. But if you do the forgiveness prayer, it clears that up.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas. And on this episode, you're going to have two Texans talking at one time. But anyway, that was the voice of our friend, Mr. Dave F., that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you are going to hear so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this episode right here is brought to you by David, Laura, Tim, and Brad. And so you ponder, you say to yourself, what exactly did David, Laura, Tim, and Brad do? Well, they went to our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little yellow donation tab and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, David, Laura, Tim, and Brad. This here episode is coming right out to youans. All right, we're going to get right into it today with Mr. Dave F. This is part one. So I've got several episodes with Dave coming in the pipeline, I guess is that what you would call it. And this is one of several. Yeah, now I actually released him on a live episode a few weeks ago, just to kind of give you an idea of the flavor of Mr. Dave F. And now we're continuing on with several different episodes. And I also have, even more episodes that I'm going to be publishing of Dave later. It's going to be some of the talks he did called Fellowship of the Spirit with Mr. Mark Houston and some other workshops that he's done, but I'm going to be publishing those at a later time. But this one we're going to call Forgiveness. Dave is from Mound, Texas, and we discuss several things. His career as an airline pilot, the forgiveness prayer, which many people call the sick man's prayer, and Dave explains that during the episode. The 12 prayers in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, a spiritual toolkit, and what exactly that is, and much, much more. Enjoy Dave, and we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy. Okay, everybody. So today we are sitting here with a gentleman, and literally sitting here with a gentleman. Sometimes I do these, as you know, remote, but this time I'm actually sitting here in Studio AA. We call this, Dave.
Okay.
We're sitting here in Studio AA, and we're talking to Mr. Dave. So, Dave, first things first, I'm going to go ahead and have you introduce yourself. Give your sobriety date if you wish, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. My name's Dave. I'm an alcoholic, and by God's grace, I've been sober since December 5th, 1981, and I currently live in Mound, Texas, and I'm a member of the Daily Reprieve group of Mound.
Daily Reprieve. I don't think I've ever been to that group of. But just so those of you who don't know, Flower Mound is very well. Comparatively speaking to a lot of the people I have on this podcast, is very close to us. Is that like a one time a week or?
Well, there's now a women's meeting also. So there's three meetings a week. Two of them are open meetings for anybody, and then there's a ladies' meeting now.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so that's the Daily Reprieve group in Flower Mound, Texas.
Yeah, otherwise known as ADR.
ADR.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's what everybody calls it. And let me
AD. So where's the D? Like,
Daily Reprieve.
A Daily. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yep.
I got it. Okay. So, as you know, we've been, by the way, I looked it up yesterday. The reason I came across you is because there was a gentleman named John D. I don't know if you would know him. I don't want to say his last name on the air. You may know him, you may not. But he had attended one of your workshops,
Yep.
and he really enjoyed what you had to say. He gave me your name and your contact information. I looked you up on the interwebs, and I saw what you were doing there, and I said I really would like to get in touch with Mr. Dave. And so we've been going back and forth though,
Yeah.
gosh, for like a year and a half. Your schedule, my schedule, it just but we finally got this put together, and I'm very happy about it. In fact, why don't we just tell people one of the reasons we've been going back and forth is because of your occupation and what you do. Why don't you go ahead and tell people what
Yeah,
you do?
I'm an airline pilot, and
Yeah.
so I fly all over. Matter of fact, I should apologize because I've been up all night. I've just landed from Hawaii this morning at 6:00 in the morning, and I led the Saturday morning men's meeting online, and then I got a 1 hour nap. So you got me on 1 hour sleep.
So do you actually attend a lot of online meetings?
I do a number of online meetings. After COVID, I started doing all online meetings, and then there's a men's group that I used to go to on Saturday mornings. I still go there once a quarter or so in Louisville at Friendship Group. And when COVID caused everybody to go online, we started the group. And since I travel all over the world, and it was an online meeting, we started getting all these international men were coming to the Louisville men's group online. And when COVID ended and the friendship group started back up, I just kept the meeting going online because we have men that show up from everywhere from South Africa to the Philippines and all over Europe and Slovenia and Spain and England and all over Canada, all over the United States. So I didn't feel like we should just shut down the group because COVID ended, and there's probably 35 to 45 men that show up from all over the world at that meeting. Yeah. It's quite an international meeting.
That group that we just attended together?
Yes.
Dave and I both went to a group local here in Frisco Fourth Dimension group. And it started kind of as an offshoot of COVID. There was another Saturday meeting in the area,
right?
And it closed down. And then we said, let's get another one going. And
sure.
It came up right after COVID. So what has your experience been with online meetings? And the reason I say that is because I've struggled with online, and what I mean by that, I love them. I love that
sure.
they're there, and I think they're fantastic. I just have a hard time getting sometimes what I need to get out of online meetings versus in-person meetings.
I pick and choose which meetings I go to. It's kind of like anything in the AA. There's meetings that carry message and they have very specific. Most of the meetings that I do online are very focused. They're about spirituality, 10-11, or right out of the big book step meetings where we talk about difficult subjects. They're not the cat peed on my rug meetings where people just bring their daily problems. They're very focused meetings. And as a matter of fact, this morning's meeting was on step 11, and the people actually prepare the topic, and they come with quotes from various AA literature, and then they'll propose something to the group, and the men let their hair down. They talk about their spirituality. They talk about their prayer and meditation. They're not just scratching the surface. They're talking about deep things and problems that they're facing. and it's a different thing. I do also. I'm a big proponent. If you're going to be a sponsor, you're going to want your sponsee's sobriety more than they do sometimes, and so I'm a big proponent of Al-Anon. I went to my first meeting was 5 years before I got sober. I was going to Alateen because my dad got sober, and he forced the whole family to go to the program. So my mom was going to Al-Anon, and all the kids, we all had to go to the Alateen meeting. And so I literally have grown up in both programs, and AA taught me how to get sober. Al-Anon taught me how to grow up. And so I do a men's Al-Anon meeting on Friday mornings, and there's probably 45 men from all over the country.
So it's online.
It's online. Yeah. It's based in, it's called the Smog Group. It's based in Seattle, Washington.
Smog Group?
The Smog Group. Yeah.
SMOG?
SMOGs, Somewhere Men's Online Group.
Okay.
That's what it stands for. And
I was thinking it was about air pollution.
No, it's once again, it was an offshoot of COVID. It started during COVID because they couldn't meet locally, and then they put it online, and somebody sent it into the World Service for Al-Anon. So it's posted on the Al-Anon website. And that's where I found it. Cause, when you go to if you've gone to Al-Anon, very often you're the only guy in the room. And so it's hard to get together. And it's something about when I go to a meeting, if you put a woman in a meeting, my behavior changes, and I have yet to break that habit. But when you get me into a men's meeting, anything, it's open game. I'll talk about any subject anywhere. I'm not embarrassed, and I'll let my hair down, but if there's a woman in there, something about my ego, I want to present a proper image or something. I don't know what it's about, but I notice there's a change in me. I don't say certain things, and I'll hold back. And so I don't like that. So I go to both. I go to meetings, mixed meetings, but most of the meetings I do are strictly men's meetings.
I'm going to shift gears here on you a little bit. Like
Sure.
I said, we were just in that meeting, and I really like what you had to say. I guess the topic was, resentments and tools and
Sure.
dealing with that. And I loved what you had to say. But also, I got to say this. I was laughing as we actually spun up this recording here. And the reason being is because I told Dave, I said, listen, I'm going to be taking notes and doing that kind of stuff during the call, during the recording. And you said, what'd you say? Do that.
You do the voodoo that you do so well. That's a line from Blazing Saddles.
So I was just cracking up. You do the voodoo that you do so well.
Yeah, it's in the pilot community, particularly the military, because I originally was a military pilot.
Yeah.
We quote movies a lot, and I got one of the greatest compliments from my eldest son, who has followed my footsteps, and he's now flying C-5s in the Air Force. And he called me up and he said, "Dad, I just wanted to call and thank you." And I said, "For what?" He said, "I showed up at my first duty station. There's 6 brand new lieutenants. I'm one of 6. And all the old heads in the squadron can't stand the new lieutenants, but they love me." And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Because not only do I know the movie, I know the line, and I know the next line." Because when they were young, when they were 13 years old or so, but took my boys and we had a men's weekend, and I recorded, I brought all the, Blazing Saddles and Animal House and Caddyshack and all the classic guy movies, and about every 5 minutes my boys would be going, "Oh, so that's where that comes from," because they flow out of me all the time. So I'm sorry if that's you're going to be getting Caddyshack, and you're going to be getting all kinds of comments from me.
Have you ever seen Young Frankenstein?
Of course.
Yeah.
What knockers? Of course. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh, what a classic film that is.
So we're still juveniles at heart.
Yeah.
People think pilots are professional, but we're just little boys that have bigger toys.
Okay. All right. So we're going from Blazing Saddles to resentments. So, but anyway, what you said about resentments, I was thinking, I want him to repeat that when we get into the into recording here. So, what did you go real quick say? What you
Sure. I was talking about the tools. we read out of the daily reflections for today's May 17th, I think, and it's a topic was resentment and forgiveness, and both in the same talk. And I talked about how most everybody is from in AA is familiar with the 4-column resentment inventory, but Bill Wilson thought it was so important he gave us 3 separate tools because the line is resentment is the number one offender and it kills more alcoholics than anything else. Well, or it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Quote properly. I can tell I'm tired. So the 4-column inventory. Well, there's a lot of people don't follow the instructions that are in the book. There's the first 3 columns, right? Column 1, person, institution, or principle. Column 2, why we're angry. Column 3 is the 7 areas that can be affected: or pride, ego, the pocketbook, sex relations, those are first 3 columns. And then in the book, then it goes in and starts talking about forgiveness. And most people, and it's one of my pet peeves, they call it the sick man's prayer. But if you read the verbiage of the prayer, we ask God to show us. The prayer isn't for them, because then you've got this attitude that you're looking down on somebody. The prayer is for us because we are the sick man. And it's really not a prayer for the other person, and it's a prayer about forgiveness. And there's actually 12 pieces, at least that's what I was taught, 12 distinct pieces in that prayer. So between column 3 and column 4 in a resentment inventory, you're supposed to be writing a forgiveness prayer. You're supposed to be offering forgiveness. And it goes back to our original history. We got our program from the Oxford Group, and the Oxford Group was first century Christian principles. And in the New Testament of the Bible, it's really important. Jesus spoke about forgiveness all the time. As a matter of fact, there's the passage in Matthew and in several of the Gospels where if you're going to come pray to the altar, but you got something against your brother, leave your offering, go make it right with your brother, and then come back to see God. That's how important it was. He wanted us to be okay with each other and forgive each other before we came up to the altar to try to get taken care of for us, right? And so the forgiveness prayer is a critical piece. And I work with a lot of people because I got sober in 1981 as a teenager. And so what happened was, because I was a teenager, a lot of parents that were in the AA meeting rooms had kids that were drinking and drugging. And they were obviously their parents. They're afraid for their kids. So they'd come up to me and they'd say, "Hey, would you talk to my kid?" And I'd say, "Sure, not a problem." So I did a lot of 12-step work. And over time, I actually developed my own style of intervention, and I became an interventionist. And which at the time there was really only the Johnsonian interventions, which Vern Johnson was this guy who was the father of interventions. But that's the kind of intervention you see on the TV show where they lie to the person to get him to come to the intervention. And what I learned very quickly is if you lie to an alcoholic, whoever does the lie to get the person to show up, that relation is damaged and it never, ever repairs. Because it's a close family member that has this tight bond, and then they get lied to, and that it breaks the bond, and there's no repairing that bond. So I developed what was called an invitational intervention. So I actually invite the addict to their own intervention, and if you do it correctly, I've never missed. I've never had it. Knock on wood. I've never had an alcoholic or addict not show up to their own intervention, and so in that process, I started working with a lot of young people and starting young people's meetings because back in the 80s, there wasn't any young people's and adult children of alcoholics. I started one of the first groups of that in New Jersey. And my life got really filled up. It got very good. And I was doing a lot of things. And I got back to aviation. I started flying because now I'm sober, and I ended up getting into the military. And what typically happens when your life fills up with good stuff, you start knocking things out. And so I'd knock out, I was going to, a meeting every day because I drank every day. So I knock out, I don't need that meeting today. I'll go to another one, and to build more time into my schedule. And I was given the gift of the big book for working the 12 steps. And my time got really compressed. So I started shortchanging the guys I was sponsoring. I'd hand them a 12 and 12 and say, "Here, go read step 1 and we'll talk about it." Because in the 12 and 12, you can find step 1. But if you don't know where step 1 is in the big book, you're not going to find it unless somebody shows you where it is. Right. And my life got really full. And then I got really, really spiritually sick because I stopped doing the practices that I was taught. Because I was going to 7 meetings a week and then 2 meetings a week and then 1 meeting a month. And then before it had been 6 months without a meeting. And, and I almost drank. I got really, really emotionally sick. And, it's a long story, but when I finally found how off the beam I was, I came back and I went through the steps again. And this was I was about 11 years sober at that point. And when I went through the steps for the second time, I had to go back and make amends to all these guys that I was shortchanging. So I took them through the big book. I said, would you do me the honor of taking you through the big book? And they're like, sure. And so when I did that, they're like, well, I got 2 sponsees. That was awesome. Would you help me? Because you went through there so fast. And so the next thing you know, I'm taking 2 guys through and then 5 guys and then 10 guys. And just to save time, I'm like, hey, why don't all you guys bring your sponsees and we'll get together. And next thing you know, I'm doing workshops. And then one day somebody says, hey, we should record these things. And, I'm getting recorded. And for you young people, we had these things called cassettes that you stuck into a machine, so I got on cassette and I don't know what the hell possessed me. But the internet was in its infancy, and I had an AOL email address, which was cutting edge at the time.
Right.
And so on one of the recordings, I gave my email address, aadave1@aol.com. Well, now I'm stuck with AOL because to this day, I get probably 5 emails a week from people all over the planet who have either heard a cassette or a CD or an MP3 or now their podcasts and their YouTube. People post stuff everywhere and they hear the email address and they're like, hey, I'm dying. There's no AA in my area. Can you help me? And I'm like, sure. And I do a lot of work on Zoom. But back in the early 90s, it was really expensive for you young people. Phone calls were not free. Right. And my phone bill was like $350 a month. And so I ended up putting an 800 number into my house. And I would work with people on the telephone from all over the United States, carrying the message. And those tapes and recordings just started blossoming and went out. And next, you're on the speaker circuit and the rest is history. And so I've had the privilege of speaking literally all over the world and carrying the message. And part of what I do is I try to teach what was taught to me because there's very few people that my lineage is I'm 5 generations away from Bill Wilson. I'm from the Bill Wilson side. Bill Wilson was in Towns Hospital with a husband and wife. The husband was in the bed next to Bill Wilson and the wife was across the hallway. And Geraldine Delaney and her husband, and they started the first rehab in the United States called Alina Lodge. It still exists up in North Jersey. And Bill Wilson was both their sponsors. Well,
is that the health farm thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, he relapsed, drank, and died. But Geraldine continued with Alina Lodge. And Geraldine sponsored Betty, a woman from Dover, New Jersey. And then in the 60s, this black guy, Nelson, came into the meetings. And nobody wanted to work with Nelson. So Betty sponsored Nelson. Nelson sponsored Carl Rozelle, and Carl Rozelle sponsored me. So I got a pretty pure big book message from the Bill Wilson side. And what I hear today is not the same message. So when I was sharing today in the meeting, to get back to your original question, sorry about the long way to get there. I talked about resentment, and then there's the forgiveness prayer between column 3 and column 4. If you haven't forgiven in your heart, how are you supposed to look clearly at your side of the street? Where was I selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid, right? And the lens you're looking through is tarnished with what the hurt you're still feeling because you haven't forgiven the other person. But if you do the forgiveness prayer, it clears that up. So that's tool number 1. The 4-column inventory is really for resentments that have got their hooks into you. They're long-term. You've been living with them for a while. And because I think of it like a disease, because you've been living them for a while, they kind of metastasize and they can really make you sick. But then Bill Wilson gave us the spot check inventory, right? It's part of the 12 daily prayers, which that's another thing a lot of people don't know. There's literally 12 prayers in the big book between page 83 and 88. There's 11 of them, and number 12 is on page 164.
I didn't know that myself.
Yeah, and
Is it? Do you have that document? Like, I would love
yeah,
to. Yeah,
that's one of the things that I'm. People call me anal because I am. I write everything down, and one of the first things that Carl Rizal ever told me was never let anybody read your big book for you. So when I do a big book workshop, I have notes and I have study guides, and I use a study edition of the big book, which numbers the paragraphs. There's a group out on the West Coast called Anonymous Press, and the first edition of the big book isn't copyrighted anymore. And so they take the first edition of the big book and they reprint it and they number the paragraphs. So on one side of the page, you'll have a page of the big book, and then you got a page for notes on the other side. And those are what I use when I teach a big book workshop. And because the paragraphs are numbered, I can say, hey, go to page 83, colon 2, which would be the second full paragraph on the page, and you can get 300 people to the exact same page and paragraph very, very quickly. So you don't get people going, oh, where are we? And it slows things down when you're teaching. Well, on page 83 is prayer number 1, and on page 84 is prayer number 2, right? And the prayer number 2 is, we watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, right? It's the spot check inventory. And then Bill Wilson gives us 6 things that we're supposed to do if we catch it in a spot check, right? That's how important it is. So he gave us 1 for long-term resentments that have got their hooks into us. He gave us 1 for when we're going through our day to catch it very quickly. And then the third tool that he gave us is from page 119, where if you've made an amend and you've cleaned up the process. With me, what I said today in the meeting was, what happens to me is usually with family, where I've had a resentment in the past, I've made amends, everything's copacetic, and then I go to a family function and somebody starts telling a story like, hey, do you remember? And, whatever year it was, 1972, when you did such and such, and it starts to bring the memory of that resentment up, right? Well, the third tool that Bill Wilson gave us is, when resentful thoughts come, pause and count your blessings. It's the gratitude list. I bet you if you went to an A meeting and you ask 100 alcoholics, hey, where's the expression gratitude list come from? They'll go, I don't know, but everybody talks about it. It comes right out of the big book. It just doesn't say gratitude list. It says pause and count your blessings, right? Which is the same thing. That's gratitude, right? So Bill Wilson actually gave us 3 separate tools, and they're in your toolbox for very specific reasons. And as a matter of fact, the line in the big book is, what are we supposed to do when we work with a newcomer? We're supposed to lay the spiritual toolkit at his feet. Nobody ever thinks about, what are the tools? Everybody thinks, well, it's the 12 steps. No, there's a whole bunch more tools that he gives us. It's kind of like the other one that boggles my mind that nobody ever thinks about is, and it's hidden in step 12, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as the result. So the whole idea for Alcoholics Anonymous is one result, and it's not to quit drinking. It's to have a spiritual awakening. It's hidden into it. And then it goes on and it says, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Nobody ever bothers to ask themselves the question, what are the principles we're supposed to be practicing? Well, there's the 12 steps, there's the 12 traditions, there's 12 concepts, 6 warranties, but there's all kinds of other principles: patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. I mean, they're listed throughout, but they're in what I call the lost chapters, the chapters nobody ever bothers to read, right? Because, the family afterwards, to employers, and it's just loaded with spiritual principles that we're supposed to be practicing. And I find that when I got sober, they were emphasized on a regular basis. And now, if I'm not emphasizing, I'm one of the few people that I ever hear that even talks about the spiritual principles. Then that's part of what I do, what I teach to my guys is, they're going to learn the 12 steps, 12 traditions, the 12 concepts, 6 warranties. And then I'm going to take them through and I'm going to teach them the spiritual principles as we're going through this work in their 12 daily prayers.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
When you were going through that, there's this new book out. I can't even remember the name. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, you got to give me a little more than just there's a book.
Well, it's the big book big book for dummies, whatever.
It's the plain language big book.
Plain language.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Have you seen? I haven't read it.
Well, I haven't seen it. Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, they went about it the wrong way. They violated tradition in order to carry it. And then finally we called them out on the tradition, because in order to change the big book, it requires 2/3 vote of all AA groups on the planet that are registered.
This isn't
hang on a second, but they originally wanted to. They wanted to, the literature committee for GSO. And then we wrote in and said, hey, number one, you need the approval of 2/3 of all the groups. Number two, it says you can't do the change like that in anything less than 5 years because it's in our service manual. So there was a time limit. So they said, okay, we won't try to change the big book. We're going to create a new publication. And so they took a lot of the stuff out of the big book, that they don't call us men and women. They call us people, so
Yeah, this is the
they changed the preamble, and I don't have a problem with that, but they missed a lot of the instructions that are in the big book that are absolutely crucial if you're going to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as it was handed down to us from Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob, because the people that wrote the book didn't understand the nuts and bolts of what's in the big book. They talk about step 4, but they don't talk about the specifics of step 4 deep enough to be able to go through and really have the spiritual experience that I have had. And then they did a really strange thing. You had to be a member of the GSO service structure to get even know that the first printing was printed. And then they sold them all off. And now people are interested and hey, where do I get one of these things? And you have to wait for the next printing. So they didn't even make it available to everybody all at once. They kind of did it to the people that were in the system that were creating this thing, which I thought was really less than ideal. They should have made it announced, hey, this is coming out, and anybody that wants to put your name on this list, and then made it available to everybody at the same time, not just people that were in the GSO service system.
Yeah, very interesting. Do you know Jimmy D?
Yeah, I know Jimmy D.
Yeah, I've talked with him about it before, and he kind of had a similar sort of slant on that.
Yeah.
He was one of the trustees when it actually came down the pike there. So anyway, I was just wondering what you think about. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about just real quick is that, the big book saved my life. I'm a big book guy. I just love it. It's when I take people through the steps. It's how I did, it's how my sponsor did it, the whole 9 yards, right? And you were talking about all the various chapters that people don't read and how good they are. I love the family afterwards. I love To the Employer. But have you ever read To the Wives?
Absolutely.
So
it's not To the Wives, it's Two Wives.
Two Wives. Okay.
Don't mean to bust your chops, but I will.
No. That's
why?
Good.
Because I can.
I like it, but there's just something about it. This is the only chapter in the book that kind of gives me a little bit of Bill wrote it, right?
Right. Well, do you know why he wrote it?
Why?
He asked Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, to write it. And she said, absolutely not. I won't do it. And it was a massive resentment with Lois because he never went to his wife and said, well, honey, would you write it? And so Bill wrote it pretending he was a woman from that perspective.
Right.
And there's a lot of spiritual principles in there
there's some good,
that alcoholics do not like.
Right.
Like the principle of you should never be angry. What? Try living that one. Yeah.
It's got some funky stuff in there.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of it, though, is like, because I know Bill's writing it, where it says, you should really be kind to the alcoholic and let him off the hook and all that kind of good stuff.
Sure.
There's a lot of that language in there, So.
Yeah.
And I know that I've talked to Al-Anons before, some of them go, it's not my favorite. It's not what they would use as their guiding light.
Correct. And it's part of what caused the friction. For the first 18 years, there was only one program. Right. And then resentments got founded and people didn't like the fact that the Al-Anons were meeting in the other room. And then they basically broke Al-Anon off from the original program. It's the same 12 steps. And now the Al-Anons have gotten to the point where they don't even allow the use of the big book, which is a massive, but in their own traditions, in the Al-Anon traditions, it says we work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, where's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? It's in the big book. I've got a history book of Next Steps. It's called. It's a big blue book, an Al-Anon book. It's out of print. They stopped printing it on purpose because in there's a literature list of the literature that Al-Anon had, and until like 1992 or 3, Al-Anon didn't have any literature. The only literature they had was AA literature, and the big book was being sold by Al-Anon. That was where the 12 steps started. And when I first came into Alateen, I was taught through the big book at an Al-Anon thing. So I work with guys in Al-Anon all the time, and I take them through the big book. But I use all the Al-Anon literature. I read the Al-Anon daily readers, and you want to do some really interesting, have some fun, go and read Lois Remembers.
Yeah.
Because Lois was sober, and she starts telling the stories about that we have in the big book. Like when Abby Thatcher came to visit Bill,
Yeah.
right? Bill says they were in the kitchen. Lois didn't say they were in the kitchen,
Right.
and she has a whole different slant on what was really going on. So Bill's memory and Lois's memory there's some funny divergences. I was cracking up reading it.
They always say Bill wrote as Bill Caesar, but Lois wrote Lois remembers.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a guy, I had him on, oh gosh, Bill S. He wrote the history of the big book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he brought up a lot of those discrepancies about the meeting in the kitchen
Yes.
and exactly what was happening and who was and who wasn't in the house and the whole 9 yards. And he talked about how, when Ebby would give his version of it, it was different,
Completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta
But it doesn't take away from the message.
It does not. It does not at all.
And there's
it's more for geeks like you or me that are interested in that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And the History Lovers is a great group that's online that I learned a lot from. The guys that dig into the minutia, but there's some real jewels hidden in there. And Dick B,
yeah,
he's now deceased, but he wrote like 25 books on the history of AA, and he was an attorney. And so he comes at things like he's preparing for a case, looking for the facts.
Right.
And he was allowed into the archive. Because he was an attorney, he bought one of the first fax or Xerox machines that were around before everybody had Xerox machines. That nobody even knew what a Xerox machine was. And he was an archivist. And so he got allowed into the level, I think it's level 4 of the archives at headquarters before they locked him. You can't get in there and look at it anymore. But he took his Xerox machine and he actually Xeroxed and copied a lot of the history and the documents that were in there. The things that like Bill Wilson used when his use of drugs and, to try to have a spiritual experience. He's got the actual copies and he used those when he wrote his history books. And so his series of books are amazing. And a lot of history of the Oxford group and the early behaviors. For example, my first probably 7 or 8 years in recovery, I was working right out of the big book. So I did the evening review. It wasn't until I was maybe 7 or 8 years sober, I finally was reading the Multilith, the original writing, and it doesn't talk about an evening review. It says, when you awake in the morning, look back on the day before. Because I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted at night. When I get ready to go to bed, and I try to do my answer the 12 questions and do my daily review, I cut all kinds of corners. I'm horrible at it. I give myself way too much slack. But if I've had a good night's sleep and I wake up the next morning and I start my morning, the one line that never made sense to me is, we consider our plans for the day. Why am I considering my plans for the day when I'm going to bed at 11 o'clock at night? It never made sense to me. But if you do the morning inventory, answer those 12 questions, and you owe an amend from yesterday, that becomes my plan for the day. Is go clean up the mess I made yesterday before I make a new mess today. And it makes the program flow so much better. And then it wasn't until I got into the A history and I found out that the editor for the second edition, Tom Usel, changed it without permission. He just made that change and changed from where the original Multilith was written and put it in there. He's also the knucklehead that changed the doctor's opinion from page 1 and made it Roman numerals. If you look at the first edition of the big book, doctor's opinion is page number 1. Yeah. And I've actually been to big book studies where they're like, well, we're not going to do the Roman numeral pages. And I'm like, what? Whoa. Are you out of your mind? There's so much meat in there. It's critically important. Anyway, I digress.
All right. So listen, we haven't even gotten into your story yet. Okay. and I love it. Right. This is so much. It is good content. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask you to come back.
Sure.
Right. And we can talk about we could talk about all kinds of things. Okay.
Sure.
We can get into your story. We can get into the steps. We can get into the workshops, the whole 9 yards. Okay.
That's fine.
I always ended up with page 164 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
And it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road to happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Once again, I really appreciate you coming and joining.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Isn't Dave the best? Well, he is, and we're going to have many, many more episodes with Dave here in the future. I'm excited to release all of them, and gosh, it was just so good spending time with Dave here, one-on-one. All right, now for a little bit of listener feedback. Laura writes in, and Laura says, sending love and prayers is the subject line. She says, good morning, John. I just wanted to send a quick message and say how sorry I am to hear about your dad. Sending love and prayers to you and your family. I'm so grateful to you, your podcast, and all your guests for sharing their experience, strength, and hope with me so that I can stay sober for one more day. Love you all, Laura P. in Edmonton, Alberta. Laura, I not only to you, but to all the people who wrote in, and I've gotten so many different messages. I'm really appreciative of it. I got to tell you, I wonder sometime about sharing those personal sorts of things on the podcast, and the only reason I struggle with it is because I don't want people to think I'm seeking attention. However, I do. The main reason I want to share those things is just to let you know that we all struggle. And we all have difficulties, and just like going into an AA meeting, and like Dave says, bleeding. I think it was Dave says bleeding on the tables of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Just letting it out there and making sure that not everybody thinks you're living this, just non I don't want to say non-chaotic, but living a life that doesn't have troubles, right? Troubles will come our way. It's just guaranteed. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Jason writes in, and his subject line was Dave F., who you just heard here. He said it was cool to hear that talk by Dave F. I recently listened to a Fellowship of the Spirit workshop with Mark Houston and Dave, and I wondered if he was still around. Well, Dave's still around. With the amount of speaker tapes I've consumed over the year, I'm a little surprised not to have stumbled across him at some point, except for the FOTS tapes, is what they call Fellowship of the Spirit. He is good stuff. His program is so thorough on the FOTS tapes, especially. It's a bit intimidating, but I like his message. I understand, Jason. I've learned a lot by listening to how he works AA. Looking forward to hearing more. Cheers, Jason. Jason, always good to hear from you, my friend. And well, this was one of those episodes, and I appreciate you writing in. John writes in, Jon, not John. He says, hey, John, I'm really sorry to hear about your father. Sounds like you are at peace with him being free of pain and in a better place now. I am, John. Thank you. I pray to stay close to God during the upcoming time. Oh, I pray you stay close to God during the upcoming time of grieving and change within your life. And I have. Understandably, you were not at the International Conference of AA. No, I didn't get to make it. He says, I did get to experience it, and it was amazing. I had the opportunity to meet a couple of friends of yours, Gary K. and Ricky C. Ricky and I have exchanged numbers and have been chatting via text. Yeah, he told me about that the other day, John. He says, what a guy he is. Yeah, he is a great guy. I'm going to join the Big Book Solution Zoom group with him and the others when I can fit it into my schedule. I turned on SoberSpeak as I was leaving Vancouver and couldn't be more excited to see that you had an episode with, once again, Mr. Dave F., and many more upcoming. I remember asking you a while back about him if you had any plans for him to be on. He has been a great help to my sobriety with all of the talks, worksheets, and wise words he has sent me. And I know, gosh, there's somebody who actually sent me in his email address. And I think I mentioned this on probably this episode. It's been a while since I recorded it. And I'm grateful to people like John here writing in right now, the others who have written in about Dave F., providing me contacts. And this is how it all works, right? I don't really... it's not like you can go out on a website and advertise for Alcoholics Anonymous speakers. You get a lot of other kind of speakers, but not AA. It's hard to find them because we're all anonymous, right? And so I'm glad for people like you, John, who write in about these guests. Anyway, John says, I also really want you to know that yourself and your guests have literally changed my life. When I came back for the first time 2.5 years ago, I was broken. I believed AA didn't work. I was working out in a camp and had minimal access to meetings at that time. I found your podcast and I began to experience the Big Book discussed in ways that I had never heard before. Yeah, one of those people I know you heard of was Gary Kay. He says, anyway, it started me back on my journey to seek the pure message and the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have since found many others in my life seeking the same, like Gary and Ricky, I'm sure, seeking the same solution, he says. The amount of friends I got to spend time with in Vancouver that I've met working all over British Columbia and who are now still doing the deal, as well as the new friends I got to meet, confirms that this is the solution, so long as I continue to seek it and do the whole deal. Thank you, John. Go with God. John D. in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. And he sent me a picture of him and Ricky and Gary Kay all standing together. And it was so good to see you guys together. Thank you so much, John. I'm glad you guys got to meet. Scott writes in, and Scott says the subject line is Joe Muck. He says, good afternoon, John. I hope this finds you well. I know you are having issues with your father, and I'll be thinking of you. I just finished listening to Joe's latest talk with you. I may know this fella. I think I may have met him in Bastrop, Texas, at a meeting, and he took me to a speaker meeting at a treatment facility in Austin. I would like to reach out to him in any case if I can. Thank you for your service, Scott H. And then he leaves his business name here and his telephone number. And as you know, Scott, I went ahead and got you in touch with Mr. Joe Muck, and I'll get out of the ways and let you guys communicate. Thank you so much. I love the name of your company, by the way. I'll say if next time you write something in, you want me to say your company name, I will. I just don't want to break your anonymity without your permission is what it comes down to. It's a very interesting company name. Christian writes in, he says, John, I wanted to write you and let you know that I'm down to my last year in prison. And for the last 5 months, since I've moved to a new camp, you and the contact with Michael, he's been writing to Michael through probably both email and through the snail mail that he had. He said, by the way, I really like Michael, Mike, I call him, on the pod a couple months ago. And anyway, you and Mike are the only AA I have had. Please keep notifying of this P.O. box. It's an invaluable resource. I am still sober and will hit my 3 years on July 1st. Well, let me go back up here and read that P.O. box again. It's Sober Speak, 1962 East Apache Boulevard, P.O. Box 7925, Tempe, Arizona, 8 55281. And once again, Mr. Mike, I love Mike to death. He monitors that P.O. box for those who cannot or do not like to send email. And so, anyway. He says, I know that you're really big on conventions, and I just saw an advertisement in the prison issue of Grapevine for the upcoming International. This has been a couple weeks ago because the International is already passed now. He says, but while at the spin is that these are existential, touchy-feely touchy-feely wonder trips. My own experience is quite different, and I don't think I'm the only one. Several years ago, I went to the International Convention in Atlanta. I was about 6 months sober at the time, and I went with a group from our Agape weekends and even stayed at the house of people we knew from Agape who moved from Florida to Atlanta. I thought I had a plan. I would go to the volunteer room and I will, quote, be part of it, unquote. It's funny. When I talk about that trip, I use it as one of my AA merit badges. Bragging about it was like to say to people, the Lord's bragging about what it was like to say, doing the Lord's Prayer with 50,000 people in the Georgia Dome and how cool it was to be in the, quote, middle of it all. The truth is something entirely different. It was too big, too loud, too much, and truly overwhelming. By Saturday afternoon, I wound up on the side of a huge walkway, sitting with my back to a pillar, arms wrapped around my knees, and sobbing uncontrollably and unconsolingly, if that's a word, he says. There were hundreds of people passing by only a few feet away, but I was unseen and unheard. The only thing I was certain of is that if a convention center employee, security guard, paramedic had found me, I would be staying in Atlanta rent-free for at least 72 more hours of yet another Baker Act. I was lost and alone in the middle of 150,000 sober alcoholics, and all that sobriety was gonna drown me rather than save me. That's when I was thrown a lifeline. A woman came over and simply kneeled down in front of me. For I don't know how long, she simply sat there, not saying anything or trying to touch me, somehow shielding me from the crowds and the chaos, and patiently waiting for me to let her in, not finding help or 12-stepping me or anything else, just being there until I wasn't alone anymore. Only then does she make eye contact and slowly and softly talk to me, helping me breathe and letting me know if I wasn't okay, I was safe, and I wasn't alone. At some point, her husband was there. I don't know how or when he showed up. He just did. And then they got me up and duck walked me with my head down, following him and her behind me, protecting the rear to go see Chuck C speak. Oh, wow, that is a while ago. She led me to a seat, and they sat on either side protectively. I don't remember a word of the lead, but I am sure that I have since confidently told both groups of individuals about what a great talk it was, got to show off the merit badges. After the talk, they somehow got me in touch with someone from my home group. Of course, no one from the group I came with, who were all incommunicado. And she came and met me at the train station and took me to her hotel out of downtown. I wound up finally meeting with some of the group I came with and going to the dome for the huge meeting, and I had to brag about later, but I don't remember that either. I have no idea who my rescuer was, and her husband, and who her and her husband are. Can't remember a name, and have never tried to find out. I want to say that she was a retired nurse and he was a retired cop, and they were both from Chicago, and they were, quote, traveling. I remember that much. If they hear this and remember me, thank you. I know these conventions are a big deal and they help out a lot of people. While the energy produced by the gathering of 100,000 or so sober alcoholics may be the best fuel for 100 riveting stories from the podium and the podcast, the power of one alcoholic reaching out to and helping another alcoholic is beyond words, because it is truly indescribable. Sincerely, Christian W. Thank you, Christian. Thank you for telling that tale. That's really cool. I hope that your guardian angels there, whatever you want to call them, hear this. If they do, they can write to me at John, John, at soberspeak.com. And thank you for taking time to write in and share your experience, strength, and hope there, Christian. May God bless you and be with you. All right, everybody. That is another episode of Sober Speak in the books. God bless you. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. I try to come here every week. I take this 1 week at a time. I may be here next week. I may not. Only God knows. And may God bless you and keep you until then. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Bye-bye. Love y'all.